I'm Landon, your Kentucky storyteller. And this is the Commonwealth Podcast, the stories of the wealth of life that Kentuckians possess through common means. Today I'm on Zoom with Mr. Mike Graese. Mike, thank you for joining us today on the Commonwealth Podcast. How are you, brother?
I'm doing fantastic, Landon. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Well, before we begin our interview, I want to let our audience know that they can connect with the Commonwealth Podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Commonwealth Stories and on Twitter at Seawealth Stories. Here, you'll be able to receive up-to-date information on upcoming episodes and get a behind-the-scenes look at what we do for the show. So be sure to head on over to our social media channels and connect with us there. Again, Facebook and Instagram at Commonwealth Stories and on Twitter at Seawealth Stories. Mike, we are here to tell your story as a Kentucky native. So let us begin by having you introduce yourself to the Commonwealth audience. Why don't you begin by telling us a bit about yourself, talk about your family, what you do, and of course, where you live.
Okay. I am Mike Graese. My formal name is Michael. I live in Ashland, Kentucky currently. Live here with my wife of 31 years, Francie, who was born and raised here in Ashland. We have 3 adult children. My youngest son lives here in Ashland, and he and his wife just had our first grandchild. She's about 6 months old, so that's just an incredible joy for us. My second son is in the Army. He's a captain serving at Fort Bragg, and he's married to his wife, who's also an Army captain, who's an Army nurse. And my youngest son works for a federal agency in Philadelphia. I just moved there from Charleston, South Carolina, with his wife, who's a neurologist and works at a hospital in Philadelphia. And they just made that move about a couple months ago. So they're new to that area. How I came to Ashland was I had been a soldier for 33 years and retired in the summer of 2017 and saw the advertisement for a city manager, decided to apply for that based on the experiences that I had in the military, and was fortunate to gain the job, which I guess we could talk about a little bit later. But as background, my father was a retired soldier. He served for 23 years. He was medically discharged in 1977. And actually, he and my mother were both from Wisconsin, Milwaukee, in a small farming community my father was from called Jackson, which is just outside. It's really become a suburb of Milwaukee now. But 2 sisters, one lives in the DC area with her husband, and another sister lives in the Gulf Shores, Alabama area near my mother, who's in a nursing care facility. So that's the background. I keep very tight with my sisters and like to keep as tight as I can with my sons and their wives. But of course, distance makes that a little bit challenging. But
Sure.
I like to joke a lot. And when people ask me where I'm from, I tell the story and say I was raised here long enough to pick up the accent.
There you
And
go.
definitely don't sound like I'm from up north. I did for a while, but I fell in love with Kentucky even as a boy. As I was able to travel around the world, really gained a greater appreciation for the culture that I grew up with in central Kentucky. My dad retired out of Fort Knox, so I was raised in Radcliff. And then in my later years, I attended Eastern Kentucky University. And I think sometimes when you're younger, you take some of those experiences for granted. As I progressed in my military career, it became more abundantly clear to me what great values that both I had from my family, but also from the community that I was raised in. And it
Sure.
feels very similar here to Ashland as I look around and I see the people of Ashland and learn the people of Ashland and see how they're very concerned with each other. And so it's something I've always been proud to say I'm from Kentucky. Now coming back to Kentucky after being gone for all those years, it's especially poignant.
Sure. Now, Radcliff is in Hardin County, Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken,
That's
which is
correct.
in the Pennyroyal region, sometimes called the Mississippi Plateau. Describe your upbringing in that region. What was it like?
I made a comparison a second ago to the value system, but the cities and the surrounding areas are different in many, many ways. Radcliff is a typical military town, a town that's next to a military base at Fort Knox. The friends I grew up with were very, very diverse from as far as different places they all came from. I mean, you could say, like I said, I was a transplant. Our family was a transplant from Wisconsin, and there was a lot of other kids like that that also very similar to me are proud now as adults to call Kentucky their home and their upbringing. Radcliff did feel transitory, at least at that time, because a lot of the people who did live in the community while my dad retired there and he made that his long-term home, we did have a lot of neighbors that moved in and out. And I would say, statistically speaking, had a much higher turnover rate than the Ashland area as a
Right.
comparison. One of my favorite parts of the job is, as I've come to know the people, all the connections that are there. I was just having lunch today with my fire chief and the deputy fire chief, and I did not realize that his wife's brother is a very good friend from high school of my wife. And that was
Oh,
a
wow.
connection I just didn't understand. And so that didn't seem to be as common in Radcliff as it is in a community like this where the roots run deep and long histories. The physical differences, of course, between Ashland and Radcliff. I remember the first time I visited Ashland in 1985, I was struck by the historic nature of the downtown.
Hmm.
Now, I'd seen other historic cities, we'd driven through them, we'd visited, but that's not what I'd experienced in Radcliffe, because Radcliffe, comparatively, is a very young city compared to Ashland, established in the 1800s. So I love the historical aspect of Ashland. I still have very strong feelings, positive feelings for my upbringing in Radcliffe and that area, because it was where I cut my teeth, and still
Sure.
have lifelong friends that are there. Was able to go to a high school reunion, the first one I was ever able to attend a couple years ago, my 30th. And gosh, just seeing some of those friends, and I'm sure everybody tells a similar story for those who weren't able to stay in their community. We picked up like, we had just graduated the day before. It was really fantastic, but really appreciated that area and appreciated the community there and what it meant to me growing up as a kid.
So you do go back and visit occasionally for things like reunions and
I was able to do that in oh gosh, actually it was 2013. It was before I got out of the military. That was the 30th anniversary. Unfortunately, the last time I made it back there was for my best friend's funeral. He died very
mm,
unexpectedly a couple years ago. Would absolutely like to get back there more often, to touch base with him and a couple other buddies. But it's, with everything going on with COVID too, that's also affected our ability to travel, and it's put a big clamp
sure.
on things, not just me, but of course everybody. But yeah, just a special place in my heart. And of course, when you haven't been back to a place and you see the things that have changed, it's always eye-opening, especially the growth here in Radcliffe and Elizabethtown.
Certainly. So thinking back then, one of my favorite questions to ask is really what did a typical weekend look like for you and your family growing up?
A typical weekend would definitely be really depend on the era and my age. When I was younger, like I said, I have two sisters that were older than me, 6 years and 2 years older. We did a lot of family stuff. We played a lot of games. We loved Uno. My dad was fantastic on the grill, and after
Good.
he retired, he became quite the cook too. While my mother continued to work at Fort Knox, she was a medical receptionist. She ended up retiring as a civil servant. But there are lots of activities, definitely church attendance every Sunday morning for sure. And then for me, a lot of time with my friends playing sports, whatever the season was, football, baseball, basketball was in vogue. And then the same thing, my sisters. My middle sister was heavy into sports, so attending each other's sporting events, depending on the time of the year. My
Yeah.
sister played tennis in high school, so we'd go watch her play. Yeah, and then an occasional vacation, whether it was Opryland or Kings Island, something along those lines. I mean, it was a really big deal. I remember the one year we went to Florida to go to Disney. We had the opportunity to do that. Our family was blessed to get an opportunity to do that. But yeah, the day to day, the weekends, yeah, it brings back some warm fuzzies, Landon, because I think of time with family. Of course, the chores, the responsibilities you had to do, like for me, cutting the grass and washing the cars and things like that. And then as I moved in my teenage years, we would cruise around. I think Campbellsville, we'd go down there. My buddy had an old Mustang, and we would drive around Campbellsville. As I recall, it was pretty benign. I mean, you drive up and down the strip. As I recall, it's a pretty short strip, and you turn around and drive back. And we used to joke that the sidewalks would roll up at 10 o'clock. I remember my friends had curfews and I didn't have a curfew, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. And then I realized at 11 o'clock, nothing was going on. So there wasn't a lot of risk with my father giving me that curfew. I'd have been standing at McDonald's by myself.
Right.
But pretty safe environment too. And a lot of fond memories of that, and just hanging out at different restaurants with friends and those type of things.
Great. Well, I hear based on our conversation that obviously your parents played a big part in your life as an influence. What other influences did you have in your life growing up?
Definitely my church. The church family went to Gloria Day Lutheran Church in Elizabethtown. Some of the church members and friends of my family, my parents specifically, definitely had impact on me. And also the relationships I had with their children. My three best friends, two that I knew since I was 10 years old or 11 years old, I think that's when we first met. Again, the one who passed away, the other which I keep in close contact with, and then another buddy we added in ninth grade whose family moved because his father was in the military. Those three men had a tremendous impact on me as a person, as a man, as an individual. Shared value systems, again, which I alluded to before, that wasn't foreign to me. I remember running around before I met Jeff and Harry with the crowd that wasn't necessarily positive, and probably heading down a path even in the fifth grade that wasn't a good path, and was blessed to meet Jeff and Harry, and we clicked. It was funny when I was at Harry's funeral, I didn't realize that people had called us the Three Amigos. Just wasn't something I was aware of, but people sharing
Right.
their admiration for the friendship we had. And it was very, very tight, and it still is with Jeff to this day. Jeff still lives in the Elizabethtown area. But those were probably my biggest influences, along with my grandparents still lived in Milwaukee. So twice a year visit we'd have with them. And both of my sisters had a massive impact on me. My decision to join the military was based on a lot of advice I got, of course, from my father and my mother, but also from both of my sisters, who I took counsel in even as a boy. To this day, I still take counsel with my sisters. I'd say those are the primary influencers.
So it sounds like much of your upbringing community was a big part of that, with your family and then your friend networks, and you've been intentional in keeping those connections along the way in as best that you can. But you've also mentioned a couple times already that faith has played a big role in your life. Can you talk a little bit about that and share your faith experience with us?
Absolutely. I was raised in a Lutheran home. It was definitely, I don't want to sound like it was obligatory, but it was, I mean, I didn't have a choice not to go to church for sure. But yeah, every Sunday and then other church events throughout the week, which was being a Lutheran in Kentucky, at least then. I really don't track this stuff now, was kind of like being a Baptist up north. I mean, numerically, it was kind of a reversal. So Gloria Day Lutheran Church in Elizabethtown was a smaller church in comparison to some of the other faiths. And so we felt a little bit, or at least me, I can't speak for anybody else, I felt a little bit like a minority, religious
Mhm.
minority at that time. And I had a lot of faith conversations with friends. Again, my good buddy Jeff Farmer, my buddy Harry and I both went to the Lutheran church with our parents. And then my buddy Jeff was raised Baptist. When Branch and I got married actually at Rose Hill Baptist Church here in Ashland. I
Okay.
came back from Germany and were married at Rose Hill with Brother Stewart, performed our wedding. And we attended Protestant chapel at the installations wherever we were stationed. And 1995, I had finished command. I was in Air Defense Artillery, which Hawk and Patriot missile systems. And on the surface, everything in my life was, you couldn't ask for more. We had three children. I was successful in my career. I knew something was missing, and I didn't know what that was.
Sure.
And my wife and I got on our knees and we prayed together, which was very awkward for me because I'd never asked her to do that before. I remember distinctly in our bedroom at Fort Lewis, Washington, and we were getting ready to change duty assignments. I was heading to Alabama, and I just prayed that God show me what was missing in my life,
Sure.
because I knew there was
Yeah.
something that was missing in my life. So we said the prayer. There was no bells and whistles, no, earth shaking, and we made a very noteworthy cross-country trip with my mother-in-law and three children that were under, I believe, the age of 4 at the time. So we went
Oh,
from
wow.
Fort Lewis, Washington, via Minneapolis to go to the Mall of America, and then straight down to Alabama. And there are some crazy stories about that trip. But I arrived at Fort Rucker, Alabama, deep South Alabama,
Mhm.
and I met my new supervisor, a gentleman named Dave Freeman. And Dave said to me, he goes, "Hey, I understand you got housing already." I mean, day one, and we'd already received housing. And I said, "Yes, sir. Great." And he goes, "Well, have you found a church yet?" And I said, "Well, I thought to myself, of course I haven't found a church. I just got here." And then it was kind of like,
Right.
And so he said to me, "Well, let me invite you over to Hillcrest Baptist Church." And I had a stigma in my mind for whatever reason, being raised a Lutheran. And I said, and then it just hit me, okay, a week and a half ago, I prayed about, this. And so we attended Hillcrest Baptist Church, and within a very short period of time, I gave my life to Christ. And
Awesome.
it is part of my testimony that since that point, it was a life-changing decision for me and a life-changing event. I've never been concerned about my salvation and the tenets of the Baptist faith and the inerrant Word of God. And it is just, it was a life-transforming event for me and my family, because it definitely had an impact on my family also. But that is part of my testimony. We ended up having a very much deeper spiritual and faith walk after that point in 1995, and had the opportunity as we moved around the rest of my military career to belong to some great church families. Loved our military brothers and sisters and the families that we learned along the way, but our families as we moved around was definitely our church family. And it was
Right.
always, the first thing that we tried to do is the first thing we tried to do when we moved to Ashland was to find our church home. And coincidentally enough, we ended up back at Rosehill Baptist Church, where we're members now.
Yeah, that was my next question, was to ask if you were back at Rose Hill with Brother Matt. So,
We sure are.
yeah, that's great. And it's good to hear that faith played such a vital role in your life. Me being a pastor, obviously, faith played a valuable role in my life and still does today. So let's go back now to Radcliff, because after graduating, you went to North Hardin High School. Is that correct? And then
That is correct.
graduated from North Hardin. And then you attended Eastern Kentucky University and studied history.
I did.
Why did you choose to go to Eastern, and what urged you to study history?
I look at what my boys went through in their admissions for college and their selections for college and all of what they went through. And in my mind's eye, both of my sisters went to Eastern. I'd
Mhm.
visited it. It was a one-page application back in the day, which comparatively to what they're doing now, just comparatively crazy. And so that just was what college felt like to me. So
Yeah,
I actually went there and was undeclared the first year and then declared marketing, and really liked marketing, but simultaneously had then enlisted in the Guard and subsequently joined the Reserve Officer Training Corps. And to be quite frank, my studies took a back seat to a lot of other activities.
sure.
And at some point, my grades were suffering. I had one awful semester. I had a captain pull me aside and use some choice words with me that I won't forget but won't repeat on here. And basically, my heart wasn't in that study anymore. My heart was really into the military aspect of what I was being presented the opportunity with. And so he'd say, "Well, what are you interested in?" I said, "Well, I like history." And that was the great decision to become a history major. And I did enjoy history. My academic performance as an undergraduate was not stellar. I did not take academics near as seriously as I didn't understood the opportunity I had at the time that was in front of me. The only reason I really was able to go to college was my father was 100% disabled from the military, and I was able to take advantage of the GI Bill. And so that enabled both myself and my sisters to go through college and earn a degree. But it was something that just interested me. And if I knew then what I knew now, I probably still would have declared history. I probably would have timed it to where I could have earned a teaching degree. That would have been a little bit more logical. But given where I was then towards getting my commission in the military, I needed to earn my degree, and that was how I went about it.
Sure. Well, it sounds to me, based on what I know about you, that your view for education changed because you also hold two master's degrees from Troy State University and then the United States Marine Corps War College. So, can you talk a little bit about your decision to pursue that further education there and what changed for you?
Well, maturity changed was the number
Right.
one thing. When I was stationed at Fort Rucker, again in Alabama, a lot happened during those 2 short years that I was there, and I knew that professionally it would help me to get a master's degree. And now, instead of being under that odd time crunch I was in my undergraduate, I
Mhm.
thought about what do I really want to study and what would help me professionally and personally, and decided Troy State offered a program on the installation on Fort Rucker in international relations. And I really did not have the distractors or the immaturity that I had when I was doing my undergraduate degree. I mean, this was taking classes at night, taking time away from my family, and I really academically blossomed those 2 years that I earned my master's degree there.
Wow.
It was something that it was challenging for sure, and I had some professors that, I didn't know Troy State University from any other college. I signed up there because it was convenient, but it was academically very challenging. And I enjoyed being stretched intellectually. I enjoyed being challenged intellectually. And the next opportunity I had to do that was I was very blessed in my career to be promoted to colonel and get command at that level, but also to be selected for the War College. The military has different war colleges. They've got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and also the Marine Corps War College, and then also National Defense War College in DC, and a series of fellowships. But long story short was an opportunity came up at the Marine Corps War College in Quantico, Virginia, which I just finished garrison command at Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia, so I didn't have to move my family. I thought I was going to be a geographic bachelor and go to the Army War College. But that master's degree was another intense year. I remember one of my mentors saying, "Oh, you're going to the Ranger School of War Colleges." And I thought, what are you talking about? It was just location convenient. We did a massive amount of reading. On average is 120 to 125 to 150 pages a night. And I thought, like some academic institutions, it would be where you start hard. The Marines, true to form, they were hardcore the whole time, which was an amazing year. The other benefit of that institution is there's only 27 students. The other war colleges have around 400 students. So when we had speakers come in and have small group with a former Secretary of Defense or Chief of Naval Operations, it was very intimate. And to hear their leadership lessons, philosophy was very personal and incredibly impactful on me that I used both through the rest of my military career, but also today. And some of those leadership lessons and thoughts and theories really resonated with me there. So another tough academic year, really enjoyed it, was ready to get out of the academic environment and go back to operations. I deployed to Iraq the year after that and was able to use a lot of the relationships that I had developed there to better serve our nation and to serve as a strategic leader for the United States.
Excellent. Well, let me say to you, brother, on behalf of all of our listeners, thank you for your service. My
Appreciate that.
grandfather was a Chief Warrant Officer, CW4, in the Kentucky Army National Guard, and actually received the 2008 Kentucky Warrant Officer of the Year commendation. So I'm really proud of him for
Fantastic.
that.
That is
Um,
awesome.
yeah, he served 2 tours in Vietnam and Afghanistan, and needless to say, he is my hero. But
Outstanding.
right. I say that because through his service and watching him as I was growing up, I gained a appreciation for men and women who give their life to the service. So, again, thank you for your service. Mike, we're going to take a quick break because I need to tell our Commonwealth listeners about an amazing opportunity with Audible, an Amazon company. We've teamed up with Audible to provide our listeners with a 30-day free trial, including 2 free audiobooks for those who sign up. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick 1 free audiobook, plus 2 Audible originals and access to daily news digest, such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and more. There are over 1,000 of audiobook titles to choose from, including many titles about Kentucky and also from Kentucky authors. Pew Study research found that 27% of adults say they haven't read a single book in the past year. Why? Their answer is, I don't have time. So with Audible, you can find time to listen to the great stories that you love while commuting, working, cooking, exercising, gardening, or whatever it may be. So for that free trial, simply head on over to www.audibletrial.com/Commonwealth Podcast for your free 30-day trial. So Mike, after retiring from the U.S. Army, you were a colonel at that point. Talk to us about your experience of becoming a colonel. How did that come about?
Well, I started on active duty in 1988. I did know I was in the Kentucky National Guard from 1984 to 1987. I graduated college in December of 87, and then went on active duty in February of 1988, which wasn't automatic. Another one of my good friends who I mentioned before, the fourth amigo later, did not get an active duty slot and fought to get on active duty, and then ended up being part of a reduction in force a couple years later after Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But got my branch of choice. I picked air defense artillery, which is essentially, knocking aircraft and tactical ballistic missiles out of the sky. And my first tour was in Germany for 3 years in a Hawk missile system, which no longer exists in the U.S. Army except in museums. And then transitioned to the Patriot missile system, which of course got a lot of acclaim during Desert Shield, Desert Storm against Scud missiles. I was able to command at the captain level, and also did a variety of assignments. I mentioned at Fort Rucker, where I was a platform instructor at the home of Army Aviation, and then later came back to Fort Bliss, which is the home of Air Defense, as a major. Was fortunate to be promoted to major and was an operations officer of a Patriot battalion. Actually, my battalion commander then was Lieutenant Colonel Heidi Brown, who went on to retire as a 2-star general person that preceded me in that job was a gentleman named Dan Carbler, who's now still serving on active duty. He's a 3-star general in the United States Army. So blessed to have peers and leaders that were very impactful on me. But then after those assignments, I went to a school for majors called the Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And since I had completed what was called a branch qualifying job as an operations officer, it allows you to have a couple years before your next look for promotion to do some other assignments, broadening assignments. So where I was selected to attend was Strategic Command, which is a combatant command for joint forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And this was a command that's responsible for the nuclear aspect of the nation's defense in Omaha, Nebraska. So I served there 3 years, still had a couple more years to fill, and so then went to Central Command. STRATCOM was a functional command. Central Command is a what they call a combatant command. So operations in the Middle East. I was stationed at MacDill Air Force Base, and frankly, I was deployed overseas much more in the Middle East than I was at home, and was called the Chief of Operations. So I ran the Operations Center floor for the G3 of CENTCOM. And during that assignment, I was selected to be a garrison commander at Fort A.P. Hill, Virginia. And so at that point, I had been promoted to lieutenant colonel. And in the Army, you've got commands at different levels, at the captain level, at the colonel level, lieutenant colonel at the colonel level. So Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia is a 76,000-acre training installation that's located between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia, and commanded that. And basically, a garrison commander does what a city manager does. It's the almost identical in responsibilities. I was very disappointed that I didn't get a tactical command, a Patriot battalion. But once I got to that installation, and the people at this installation just lived, breathed, and slept customer service. And I was all in. I just felt like a fish in water. I clicked with the people there. They felt very familiar to me. The people of Central Virginia felt very familiar to me as the people of Kentucky. I love that staff like I love this staff. And they were just focused on always trying to serve their customers as a training installation. So I discovered I really love that. We did very well there. It's going to sound bragging. I hope it doesn't. The Army has a competition that if an installation chooses to participate, it's called the Army Community of Excellence. And it's this entire process, which included site visits by evaluators. But Fort A.P. Hill, before I arrived there, had finished third of all installations in the Army 2 years in a row. My first year, we finished third. And then the second year, we were able to win #1 installation in the Army.
Wow. That's great.
And it was, again, I don't want it to sound braggadocious. We got a $2 million check. We got all these accolades. But really what it was all about was an organization that was just maniacally focused on customer service.
Sure.
And that so appealed to me, watching those people day to day to do that. So I finished command there and went, as I mentioned, to the Marine Corps War College, and then a year in Iraq. That was an interesting year. I served in an organization called the Force Strategic Engagement Cell. And this was set up by General Petraeus a couple years before I got there. And basically, this was a reconciliation effort with insurgents and extremists. So this was an organization that attempted to make peace and bring sides together to peaceful solutions.
Yeah.
And I was the chief of staff for that organization. And it was controversial work because it's very polarizing work. Either people fully supported it or they did not support it. One of the generals, I probably shouldn't quote this because I don't know who said it, who showed his support for an organization like this, said, you can't kill everybody. And it was a really harsh thing to say, but the killing was not the solution there. And so that's why General Petraeus had set up this organization. During my time there in Iraq is when we were handing the mission over. The U.S. was leaving Iraq, and we ended up handing that mission off to the Department of State. And so I was very honored to be part of that handoff. I helped facilitate that transition in order to help continue to make progress in Iraq. When I got back from Iraq, I served in the Pentagon for a year in a missile defense organization. And then during that time, I was selected to command a garrison again. And so a long answer to your question, how did I make colonel? It was through a series of jobs that enabled me to increase responsibility, my educational level professionally. And then I was selected to command the garrison in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And if you know anything about the Army, Fort Jackson is where about 60% of basic combat training occurs for the Army.
Wow.
We did, I think it was about 80% of female basic training and 60% total. There's only 4 installations that do basic training. There used to be a ton, but as part of base realignment and closure, they consolidated to different locations. Again, I had an opportunity to command 3 years. Normally commands are 2 years. I took the third year option both times. And again, just another great experience with an organization. It was about 1,500 people in the garrison, just focused on serving soldiers and their families, improving quality of life. Absolutely love that. And then my last assignment, I was selected to be the executive officer to the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management in the Pentagon. So the 3-star general that was responsible for 156 Army installations, I got to be their executive officer. So
Wow.
essentially a chief of staff again. I served 2 general officers there, General Dave Halverson and then General Gwen Bingham. The unique thing on General Bingham was that she was the first African American female to be promoted to 3 stars who was commissioned through ROTC. Watching her impact on young officers who viewed her as a absolute role model
Yeah.
was amazing. And to see her mentor, she would stop, she would be late for appointments with other very influential people to mentor young officers and young soldiers. And she definitely had a great skill for that and a penchant for that. General Dave Halverson is somebody who is already mentioned in some of the history books for the impact that he had as a planner for Operations OIF and OEF. Very tough man to work for, but he also developed me professionally in ways that I could never imagine. I was really hoping to stay in the Army past that and to continue to serve. But if you don't make general officer, then they say it's time for you to go.
Right.
And so I went to a transition course where they said, what do you want to do when you grow up? Kind of attitude. And I prayed extensively about it. And I felt God very clearly said to me, although it may appear obvious to what I've just told you, but it really was. And I could have done a lot of things. I could have gone into air defense area. I had interviewed for a job down at Fort Knox while the interviews were going on here and had made the final cuts for the Knox Regional Alliance, which is an organization that was established to help crack-proof Fort Knox. And they've got great leadership down there now who they hired. So there was a lot of different opportunities, but I prayed on and I really felt like God was leading me to go into city management. And then I get a call from my brother-in-law who said, hey, did you know the city manager job here in Ashland is open? So I threw my name in the hat. Frankly, I was really just hoping to get an interview because I hadn't interviewed for a job since I was 16 at Wendy's.
Wow.
And, the transition course really set us up for that. And long story short was that it worked out here and just finished my third year as serving as a city manager. And the satisfaction that I get from this job is very similar to being a garrison commander in that every single day, myself and my staff have an opportunity to positively impact our community.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a staff of right at 300. It's a little bit less right now because of hiring restrictions due to the impact on our income, on our revenue. So we're short staffed, but I'd put this staff up against either the 1,500 I had at Fort Jackson or the 300 I had at Fort A.P. Hill. They're just very dedicated employees who care for their community and are constantly trying to make life better here. And we do make mistakes. I make mistakes every day. I always love the adage that if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying.
Right.
And this staff really works hard. We've got some historic challenges with our infrastructure here, which we're making fantastic progress on. I've got an elected mayor and commissioners that absolutely understand the challenges we have here. They are very, very focused on moving this community forward and to make this the best place to live. It sounds so routine, the best place to live, work, and play. But it's truly what their focus is. Part of our vision is the place you want to be. And we're working really hard to do that. We brought Roger Brooks in, who is an outside downtown revitalization expert. He's internationally known. AEP picked up his tab. We brought him in. He brought a level of energy and excitement here. And if you ever have an opportunity to listen to him, it's not rocket science. It's just basic stuff about revitalizing a downtown.
Right.
And then much like an ink spot, for not just the city, but our entire community, the stronger Ashland is, the stronger the county is, the stronger the region is. And that's kind of the vision that our elected officials have that they've charged me with, get us there. And my team is all on board. Our team, I should say, is all on board with this. And we're moving that way. COVID-19 has been a huge curveball for all communities, not the least of which ours. But the positivity, the can-do attitude is still very, very strong with both our elected officials and also the staff and the community.
Right. So let's go back then to the foundational level, because when we hear a word like city manager, perhaps not everybody really understands what that job title is involved in. So Give us your elevator pitch. I mean, if you had a minute just to tell us what you do as a city manager, how would you describe that?
So I facilitate a very talented staff of directors and special staff, and those directors include the police department, the fire department, human resources, community economic development, finance, utilities, city engineer, city attorney. I don't think I left out anybody. I'm sure I'll hear if I did. But essentially, my job is to help them be successful. They are all visionaries. They're all
Yeah.
educated, intelligent. Streets. I knew I'd forget somebody. Public services. They're all very educated, very intelligent, very hardworking, and they understand what our mission and vision are for this city. They understand our comprehensive plan, and they're focused on making that happen. So getting them the resources they need, whether it's time, people, or money, ensuring that they're not distracted with the mundane, that
Sure.
they keep their eye on the big picture, and that we perform at a level that's we're fiduciary responsible to our citizens. Not being haphazard on how we spend the money. It's taxpayer money, and we
Right.
realize that. And so making sure that we have that focus. I'm the facilitator, the leader for that. I'm very crystal clear on my chain of command, and that is the mayor and the commissioners are my boss. They set the strategic vision for the city and they approve policies, and it's my job to execute those and make sure that the staff does their part on that too.
Great. So you've talked already about two challenges, which number one would be COVID, and that's a challenge that's affected everyone. One particular challenge in your role you spoke on already is the infrastructure. Talk a little bit about that challenge, and then Mike, tell us a little bit about perhaps other bigger challenges that you face and that you see that the city of Ashland will be facing here in the future.
Well, I can give you a lot of statistics on our utilities, and I'll say these things, but I'll throw some out there for you. So, for example, we have about 300 miles of water distribution pipes throughout the city.
Hmm.
AWWA, which is a professional water organization, recommends that cities and municipalities have no more than 14 breaks per 100 miles per year. Our average has been 80.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's astronomical. There are some people in the city who never lose water. There are some people who lose it all of the time.
Hmm.
It's not just the age of pipes. A lot of our ductile iron pipes were put in at the turn of the century. Those are some of our best pipes. They have tuberculation in them, but man, they'll go forever. But then some of the steel that we put in the 50s and 60s deteriorates from the inside and outside. Most of those are 2-inch and 6-inch lines. That's where most of our breaks are. And getting those lines replaced is a monumental task. Our water distribution teams, we've got 5 crews of 3 people each. They are fantastic. They're fantastic because they get a lot of practice. The mayor and the commissioners committed 2 years ago to committing $1 million a year dedicated just to line replacement, not repair. And we spend that money. As a matter of fact, the first meeting of the new year, we committed $800,000 of that money to 2 major projects. But that's one aspect of it. The next is our water treatment plant. Our water treatment plant has had some challenges with filters, and it's taken us a couple of years to figure out what's happened. We brought in an engineering forensic company called Barton and Lodgedice out of New York after we had filter failures, and discovered that we had air and pressure surges that nobody knew were there. It's easy to look back with hindsight and say, well, you shoulda, coulda, woulda. Bottom line is that until we started having catastrophic failures on some of these filters, we didn't know why. And we were able to backtrack that through some great work through the contractors and our staff. And we're in the process right now of putting in new filters. We have 6 filter bays in the water treatment plant. 2 of those have these new stainless steel filters, which are much less complex than the ones they had in before. And we're super, super excited about getting those in. Simultaneously, this plant is run manually. We don't have something called SCADA, which is essentially instrumentation to automate a lot of the processes that are down there. So, Landon, you may be on shift and you hold the backwash button for 12 seconds and I hold it for 10. Well, that has cause and effect cascading down the line. And so much of that, we're investing $3 million in that at our water treatment plant
Right.
to automate those processes. So by next spring, we're going to be in a healthier position than we've ever been. The quality of our water has never been in doubt. I say this all the time. I drink tap water every single day in the city. I don't think twice about it.
Yeah.
And we're going to start publishing the fact of bottled water that you buy, the quality of our produced water is higher in so many ways. And I don't think people realize that and don't have the confidence because they associate the breaks with poor quality. That's just, the heart is good. The arteries are what needs repairing.
Right.
So
Right.
if you want to look at it that way. And then wastewater treatment and wastewater collection, we're on the verge of our citizens have been paying a combined sewer overflow charge for years now to enable us to build up enough funds to, by federal mandate, we have to update our wastewater collection and also our wastewater plant. And we're in the process of pre-engineering that new plant. It's not going to be a new plant. We're going to refurbish the old one that we have to have done by 2024. And we're on a great glide path for that. So again, our citizens have paid into this, and we're going to make sure that every penny of that money is spent to have a system that will be as long lasting as possible. So those are the utility challenges that we have. And like other communities, our elected officials are faced with raising taxes or doing bonds and, having the financial wherewithal to get to where we need
Sure.
to be, because we
Yeah.
need to have confidence in our utilities. And that was the number one mandate they gave me when they hired me was,
Wow.
you need to lead the charge on getting our utilities fixed. I was blessed with a team that's very, very good and very knowledgeable, and we're definitely making progress. To the second part of your question, the next biggest challenge I think is also societal. I don't know of any community that's not faced with the opioid crisis
Sure.
and the devastating effect that those have on our community. I hear a lot of smart people talk about a lot of reasons why this epidemic is here. What I hear in this very resilient community of Ashland is, to talk about the loss of jobs, the loss of industry, which is very true. I do look at Ashland and say, gosh, we could be in such worse shape. I've been to some towns that aren't very far from here that are on the surface a lot more
Yeah.
challenged than we are. And so I think the leadership in this city for decades has done an exceptional job of keeping our head above water. And it's probably why you see some of the lack of investment that they've had in years in the utilities. Or again, that sounds critical. I don't mean it to be, because you don't know what decisions were made years ago. There's things we know about our plants that we didn't know a year ago. And so,
Sure.
but I tip my hat to those who are still alive, that have been part of keeping this community strong, but also the folks that have passed on that really had so much pride in Ashland and Boyd County that really made it a special place to be. But the answer to the opioids isn't just, it's not city government. We do law enforcement well. I mean, we've got a phenomenal police department. We've got a phenomenal fire department. They are both spectacular and great at what they do, community policing, et cetera. It really has to be a coordinated effort between altruistic organizations, I think the faith-based community,
Yeah. Right.
professional organizations that do recovery, the city and local government, not to get in the way of those efforts. I mean, our homeless population is, a lot of the homelessness is tied not only to opioids, but also, mental challenges. So utilities to me is a lot more comfortable because I can define it. We can define what the issue is and come up with a solution. When you're talking about the opioid epidemic, that's harder to define, and therefore it's harder to come up with a solution.
Sure.
And so I'd say those are probably the two biggest challenges for us. Now, on the opportunity side, as I mentioned before, when we see a revitalization of downtown, we aggressively pursue, we work with the Ashland Alliance, our economic development team, other communities to try to attract industry and jobs here. I know that Brady is very polarizing to some people for whatever reason. I don't know why people wouldn't want to hope for the best. It does seem like to be there's a lot of negative nabobs who, almost seem to want this to fail. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't happen, I understand. But the amount of time that we've invested in this is really chump change for the possibility of an industry like that coming here, and then all the residual industries that would come with it. So on one hand, you've got the chasing the smokestack, so to speak, as some people say, but then also creating Ashland as a place to live, because you think about your podcast, you can do that from wherever you want.
Right.
And so if you see a place that you want to live that has a great quality of life, well, you can pick up your family and move there. I mean, that's much more relevant and commonplace today than I think it was 20 years ago with the impact of, social media and technology. So many people work from home. And as we've discovered, during COVID, there's a lot of jobs that can be done from home.
Certainly.
So
Certainly.
making this a place that's attractive for people to, one, for our people to stay here.
Right.
When I first came here, my wife and I were eating down at a local restaurant, and a high school girl was serving us that my in-laws knew. And hey, how are you doing in college? I think she was going to Eastern. She goes, oh, I just can't wait to graduate and leave. And
Yeah.
I said, well, why? And it was awkward. The words just came out. She goes, well, there's just not much opportunity here. And I said, well, hopefully that'll change. And a lot has to do with your stage of life, but we always came back and visited Ashland throughout our entire career. When I took leave, we tried to come back here in Radcliff where my parents were. And I have such an affinity for it. The values, some of the things we talked about before that are really strong here that make it a great, great place to raise a family or be single. There's not a particular demographic that is attractive to. There are so many great things that this city and this region offer, but I get it. This community has taken it on the nose for 30 years, so it's
Yeah.
difficult to be optimistic about it. I understand that. I understand it as if you will, an outsider coming in. I don't understand it, but having known the people that have lived this, I get it from that level. So I'm most excited about creating an area that people would want to come to, that they want to stay. That will be followed by tourism. And I don't see any reason why we can't be the best Ashland we can be. That doesn't mean we're Greenville, South Carolina, or
Yeah.
Asheville, North Carolina, but why not? And when Roger Brooks gave his presentation, and we've got this Destination Ashland team that's been meeting every other week. We took a break during COVID for all the obvious reasons, but we're back on board. There's some things that are going on. Judd Plaza was renamed Broadway Square. 13th Street to 18th Street is called the District. It's not just for naming it, it's so that we can market that.
Sure.
And that's going to be part of the success that comes. Changing the mindset of stores closing down at a certain time in the afternoon. Roger had pointed out that his generation ate at 5:30 at night. Today's generation eats at 7:30 on average, and they like convenience. They want to go out.
Yeah.
Well, they don't want to just go to a restaurant. They might want to go to a specialty shop, and those are the type of things that are going to make us attractive. But it doesn't happen overnight. So the
Sure.
people in the community that are getting this are very, very much behind it. I know there's some skeptics that are out there, and hopefully we can bring those over to being part of the success of the city.
Well, growing up in Lawrence County, Kentucky, which is, 30 minutes south of Ashland, and then now my family living in Olive Hill, Kentucky, which is in Carter County, just west of Ashland. Eastern Kentucky, that is very much so, as long as I can remember, there's been more negativity than there has been positivity. And it's nice to see that there are folks who still believe in our area in Eastern Kentucky that we can provide value for people of all ages with diverse jobs and upbringings and so forth. Because I look at what you're doing in Ashland, and I recognize that Ashland plays a big role in its surrounding community, but I see Ashland as playing a role in the whole scheme of the state of Kentucky. So can you speak on that and what impact you think Ashland can make in its surrounding community? And then what impact can Ashland make in the whole scheme of the Commonwealth?
You've heard the adage of, rising tide floats all boats.
Sure.
And this may be controversial. I don't think it's controversial. Again, I wasn't raised here, so I didn't have the day-to-day immersion that somebody who's raised and has lived here their whole life. The competition between Ashland and Boyd County, I think I can relate to that a little bit from Radcliff and E-Town, or Hardin County and E-Town. We had a similar thing, but it didn't seem to be, and a lot of people I really respect said a lot of it had the genesis in, sports, competitive sports.
Yeah.
But it almost seems, and this is very anecdotal, Landon, but it almost seems like there's times where the entities would feel like they're working against each other.
Mhm.
And that's not something that is going to help anybody. And so I think there's leadership, elected leadership. I can only vouch for me and my team that, the city team and some of the other organizations I participate in, whether it's my church or, other civic groups that I get to speak to, there's a strong desire to get past that because, a house divided, right?
Right.
And so I think at least the people that I run with or the people that I communicate with or have touch points with recognize that there's a golden opportunity for us on this. There's a slide in Mr. Brooks' presentation that shows an old wagon coach with horses pulling in 4 different directions.
Yeah.
And when I saw him present this at the KLC, I was like, oh my gosh, that's us.
Yeah.
There's so many people working so hard, but it's not synchronized. And so, your question, what can be for the region of the state? I go back to that ink spot mentality that, whether it's downtown Ashland at Broadway Square, if that's the ground zero for, positivity happening. I know the county is working a ton of great stuff. Judge Cheney, young guy with a lot of energy, he's very intent on being good teammates with us. And the communications that we have, that he has with our elected leaders, I think is only positive. Stretching out to, Judge Carpenter and Greenup County and the other judges to really try to say, this isn't just about Ashland. It's not. I mean, I'm the
Right.
Ashland city manager. That's my focus. But I absolutely believe that something that happens positively in Lawrence County can absolutely have positive effects on us.
Sure.
So look, if we're all bidding against the same business to come in, well, that's healthy competition. But I'd rather them land here than in another part of the state, or worse, in another state. And that's where we need to come together and say, hey, let's put our best foot forward. To the impact on the state, again, a lot of people think Eastern Kentucky, they think Ashland. That was the metropolis, if you will, for
Sure.
decades. That's where people came and did their Christmas shopping. And, a lot has changed with the internet and the ability to purchase, but that's one of our focuses. People want that Etsy experience, and the days of Macy's and those type of things, you can see it changing societally. And so why can't we have that, and Olive Hill have that version of theirs too? If you want to see a little bit more numerically, we'll come to Ashland. If you want a smaller experience with that, just based on population, well, why not Olive Hill? Why not Russell? And so I really think that Ashland can be a beacon on so many different levels. I look at what the neighborhood does for people who are down on their luck here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was blown away by that when I first walked through that facility with Todd and his team.
Me too.
And it's such a labor of love, and it's so sincere. And again, that's just another peg that's going to help us be the solution. So I think, identifying what our challenges are, simultaneously working economic development and also cultural change that helps the people that need help. What our average income is here. It's very, very low comparatively nationwide. That's good from the cost of living perspective, but there's a lot of people, I came from the federal government, so it's a very different discussion when you're talking budget. I would love to have more money for pipeline replacement, but that money's got to come from somewhere. And the mayor and the commissioners remind me all the time, that's taxpayer money. I know that intellectually.
Right.
I want to move as quickly as we can on the fixes, but it is a balance. And I feel comfortable speaking for the elected officials here that they never lose sight of that. I mean, that is number one is, again, this is going to sound like a stereotype, but the little lady who's on a fixed income is very, very much in our community. And so any small change in tax rates has a monumental effect on our citizens. And I love the fact that our mayor and commissioners are passionate about not forgetting that.
Excellent. Well, Mike, there is so much that I want to touch on, so much I want to go back and ask you about, but we're running out of time. So
all right.
I'm going to move now into what I call the lightning round. And the challenge is that you have to answer these questions in 3 words or less.
That's hard for me. That might be the biggest challenge of the year for me.
All right. So where is one place in Kentucky that you would take someone who had never been to Kentucky?
Ashland.
Ashland. There we go. How would you describe Kentucky to a person that has never been to Kentucky?
Genuine people.
Okay. What is your most memorable moment in Kentucky history?
This is going to be odd. Martha Lane Collins Toyota.
Okay. Do you like L8?
Love it.
Okay. Have you tried orange cream and cherry?
No.
All right. You need to try the 2 other flavors and get back with me.
No, I'm sorry. You said I've tried cherry.
Oh, you've tried cherry.
I've not tried the orange cream. Yes, I did. I like the cherry.
Okay. Would you choose cherry or original?
Original.
Okay, of course. All right. So here's another tough question. Final one. If you could live anywhere else in the world besides Kentucky, where would you live?
Ooh, this is going to be a tough one based on experiences. That's more than 3 words. Nebraska, I guess. It's so crazy. I think of all the places we lived in, and there's just so many great places, but Nebraska, I guess. My wife would kill me for saying that.
Oh, goodness. Well, Mike, it has truly been a joy to sit down and hear your story. I've been thrilled by it, and I'm excited to share that with our Commonwealth listeners. So if people want to get in touch with you or send a word of encouragement your way, how can they get a hold of you, brother?
My email is mgraese, Graese, at ashlandky.gov. I can be reached in my office at 606-385-3400. And if anybody does try to get a hold of us, they've got some issues. We are rotating people for COVID protection, and sometimes we forget to forward phones. Just get a message to us, and we fix that as quickly as we can. It seems like we do better, and then we slip back a little bit. I will say this, Landon, this staff is really excited about getting criticism, positive and negative, that will help us improve things. And
Sure.
it always makes me sad when people call up and they apologize for bringing things to our attention. It's the only way we can fix them. It might be
Right.
obvious to people that see it every day, but we don't. And the staff is very short right now, given some of the furloughs that we had to do. So I highly, highly encourage people to get a hold of me. We've got something on our website called Ashland Cares, and it's for non-emergency type events, a pothole, a neighbor whose grass is too high, those type of things. That goes directly to the people that can make things happen. That goes directly to the streets department, directly to
Okay.
the police. And so if you go to our website and just hit Ashland Cares, it's pretty intuitive. You can do it on your cell phone. You can put pictures in, which helps our team. But I would highly encourage that. Or get a hold of me, get a hold of an elected official, and they'll definitely get a hold of me.
Great. Mike, again, thank you for joining the Commonwealth Podcast. And thanks to you all for listening to the Commonwealth Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, head on over to iTunes and give us an honest 5-star review. Again, if you wish to connect with us on social media to be updated on upcoming shows, giveaways, and more, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Commonwealth Stories and on Twitter at Seawealth Stories. We'll be releasing a new episode of Commonwealth Podcast every week on Monday morning. So be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform to be updated on new upcoming shows. Until next time, thank you all for joining the effort to show the wealth of life that Kentuckians possess through common means.